Your intuition was right, your soulmate's own decision is hurting them right now. Stay with me for a moment. I know there's a part of you that has been trying to move on, trying to be logical, trying to quiet that inner voice. But something in you never fully settled. Even when the story on the surface looked finished, even when silence replaced conversation, even when life kept moving forward, you felt it. A subtle pressure in your chest. A thought that returned when you least expected it. A knowing that didn't come from memory, but from somewhere deeper. That wasn't imagination. That was intuition. From the outside, it may look like they chose differently and walked away without consequence. It may look like they are fine, settled, unbothered. But intuition doesn't respond to appearances. It responds to truth. And the truth is this: the decision they made, the one that took them away from you, is hurting them now in ways they never expected and don't know how to undo. When they made their choice, they told themselves it was necessary. They framed it as practical, reasonable, even mature. They said it was about timing, circumstances, responsibility, or stability. And for a while, that explanation worked. It helped them sleep. It helped them move forward without looking back too often. But choices made to avoid discomfort don't disappear once the discomfort is postponed. They resurface later, when life slows down enough to be felt. And that is where they are now. There is a difference between relief and peace. Relief is temporary. Peace is settled. What they felt after choosing a different path wasn't peace. It was relief. Relief from intensity. Relief from vulnerability. Relief from the emotional honesty that being close to you required. At first, relief can feel like clarity. It can feel like the right decision. But relief fades. And when it does, what remains is the truth that was avoided. They didn't lose you in a dramatic moment. They lost you quietly, through a decision that seemed manageable at the time. And now, in the quiet spaces of their life, the weight of that loss has begun to show itself. You sensed this shift before you had any proof. Maybe you felt it as restlessness. Maybe as sadness that didn't fully belong to you. Maybe as dreams where they appeared more vulnerable than they ever were in real life. These weren't random experiences. They were signals. Because while you have been processing the pain openly, they have been carrying it internally. They didn't expect it to hurt this way. They thought choosing differently would make things easier. They believed that stepping away from depth would protect them from complexity. What they didn't realize is that depth isn't something you escape. It's something that changes you. And once you've touched it, everything else feels thinner by comparison. Life kept going for them. Routines formed. Days filled up. On the surface, things looked normal. But inside, something began to feel off. Conversations felt flatter. Connections felt less alive. Even moments that should have brought joy carried an undercurrent of absence they couldn't name. That absence was you. Not you as a person they could reach out to, but you as an experience. You as a feeling of being understood without effort. You as a space where they didn't have to perform or explain or hide parts of themselves. They didn't realize how rare that was until it was gone. This is where your intuition becomes important. Because you weren't sensing longing in the romantic sense alone. You were sensing regret in its earliest stages. Regret doesn't always look dramatic. Often, it starts as quiet discomfort. As a sense that something essential was left behind. They are questioning themselves now, even if they would never admit it out loud. They are replaying moments. Not the arguments, not the confusion, but the simple ones. The way you listened. The way you noticed small changes in them. The way time felt different when you were present. These memories surface unexpectedly, catching them off guard. And when they do, there is a pain that follows. Not sharp, but deep. The kind of pain that doesn't ask for attention but refuses to leave. They wonder if they misunderstood the connection. If they minimized something that deserved more respect. If fear disguised itself as logic and guided their choice. These questions don't bring comfort. They bring awareness. And awareness is uncomfortable when it arrives too late. You may be wondering why this matters to you now. Why you feel it if you're not part of their daily life anymore. The answer is simple, but not easy. Deep connections don't sever cleanly. They stretch. And sometimes, you feel the tension on your end before the other person understands what they are holding. Your intuition was responding to that tension. But here is something you need to hear clearly. Their pain does not mean you are meant to return to waiting. It does not mean you are meant to rescue them from the consequences of their own decision. It does not mean the door is automatically reopening. Pain is not always a signal to reunite. Sometimes it is a signal to grow. Right now, they are facing the emotional cost of choosing safety over truth. And that is a lesson they have to sit with. You cannot learn it for them. You cannot soften it without diminishing yourself. This is where your strength begins to show, even if you don't feel strong. You walked through the pain directly. You questioned yourself. You grieved honestly. You didn't numb it or rationalize it away. That process has been shaping you in ways you may not fully see yet. They avoided that process. And now, it has found them. Their hurt is not punishment. It is alignment. It is the natural response of the heart when it realizes it made a choice without fully listening to itself. They feel disconnected from themselves in moments. Unsure why dissatisfaction appears when everything is supposed to be fine. That confusion is part of the reckoning. And still, your intuition remains steady, not frantic, not desperate. It doesn't pull you backward. It simply confirms what you already sensed. The connection mattered more than either of you acknowledged at the time. But intuition is not meant to trap you in the past. It is meant to guide you forward with clarity. You are not meant to measure your worth by their regret. You are not meant to hold space for someone who could not hold space for you when it mattered. Their pain is theirs to understand. Your path is yours to walk. And something has already begun to shift in you. You are no longer asking what you did wrong. You are no longer replaying every moment to see where you could have been different. You are beginning to see the truth that was hidden by loss. You were present, open, and emotionally available. That was not a flaw. That was your strength. What hurt them now is not losing access to you. It is realizing they walked away from a version of themselves that existed when they were with you. A more honest version. A more awake version. And that realization cannot be undone by apologies or explanations. It can only be integrated through growth. You don't need to confront them with this. You don't need to wait for them to say it out loud. Your intuition doesn't ask for validation. It simply acknowledges what is. As time moves forward, you will feel less entangled in their experience and more rooted in your own. The awareness that once felt heavy will become neutral. Then empowering. You will recognize that being deeply connected does not guarantee being chosen. And being chosen does not always mean being right. You are learning to trust your inner voice not just about others, but about yourself. And this is only part one of that journey. Because the same intuition that sensed their pain is beginning to guide you towards something else. Something that does not require waiting, guessing, or emotional distance. Something that meets you fully, without hesitation. Their lesson is unfolding in its own time. Yours is unfolding now. And you are exactly where you are meant to be. Stay with me a little longer. This is where things become quieter, deeper, and more honest, not in a dramatic way, but in the way truth usually arrives when you're finally ready to hear it. There's something happening beneath the surface now, something subtle but significant. You may not be able to explain it clearly, but you feel less frantic than before. Less desperate for answers. Less consumed by the need to know what they're thinking or feeling. That doesn't mean the connection vanished. It means your relationship with it is changing. And at the same time, their inner world is becoming louder. The pain they are experiencing isn't the kind that asks for sympathy. It's the kind that asks for self-reflection. The kind that shows up when distractions stop working. When routines no longer numb. When they find themselves sitting alone with their thoughts, realizing that the choice they made solved one problem but created another they didn't anticipate. They thought moving forward would silence the ache. Instead, it relocated it. There are moments now when they feel a strange heaviness without an obvious reason. Nothing is technically wrong. Life is functioning. People around them see stability. But inside, there's a sense of disconnection they can't shake. A quiet grief for something they didn't think they would miss this much. That grief doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up when they feel unseen in conversations that are supposed to feel intimate. When they realize they're explaining themselves again, instead of being understood. When they notice they're shrinking certain parts of themselves to keep things smooth. They didn't realize how much they expanded when they were with you. With you, they didn't have to compress their emotions or simplify their truth. They didn't have to pretend clarity when they felt confusion. You allowed complexity. You allowed honesty without punishment. And now, in comparison, they feel the absence of that space. This is where regret becomes real, not as longing for you specifically, but as longing for the way they were able to be themselves around you. That's the part they didn't know they were choosing away from. Regret doesn't always mean wanting someone back. Sometimes it means recognizing that a version of your life felt more alive, and understanding that you walked away from it before you fully understood its value. They are sitting with that realization now. And you feel it, not because you are meant to carry it, but because deep connections leave imprints. For a time, those imprints resonate between two people, even at a distance. But here's what's important. As their awareness grows, yours is stabilizing. You are no longer in the phase of emotional free fall. You've passed the point of questioning your worth. You've passed the point of replaying every interaction, searching for a different outcome. What remains is a quieter clarity. You're beginning to see that the pain you felt was not a sign of failure. It was evidence of depth. And depth always feels like loss when it's not reciprocated fully. There is a difference between missing someone and missing what you represented in their life. They are experiencing the second one. You are moving beyond the first. That shift matters. Because it means you are no longer emotionally positioned beneath their decision. You are no longer waiting to see if they will realize something in time. You are no longer holding your breath for an acknowledgement that may or may not come. You are standing back in your own life. And from that place, everything looks different. You begin to understand that intuition isn't just about sensing others. It's about sensing yourself. It's about recognizing when something is aligned and when it isn't, even if it feels powerful. Your intuition wasn't only telling you that they would hurt. It was also telling you that you would grow. And growth doesn't always feel like progress at first. Often, it feels like detachment. Like emotional quiet. Like the absence of urgency. You may notice that you're not as reactive anymore. Thoughts of them still come, but they don't hijack your nervous system. Memories still surface, but they don't destabilize you. There's space now between the thought and the feeling. That space is healing. Meanwhile, their emotional world is doing the opposite. The space they tried to create by choosing differently is filling up with unresolved emotion. They're being forced to feel what they postponed. And this is where many people misunderstand the meaning of intuition. Intuition is not a promise of reunion. It's not a guarantee that someone will return once they realize what they lost. Intuition is awareness without attachment. It tells you what is true, not what will happen. The truth is this: they are hurting because they made a choice that required them to abandon emotional truth for emotional comfort. And comfort without truth eventually becomes hollow. But that hollow feeling is theirs to confront. You are not meant to step back into their life to soothe it. You are not meant to offer understanding at the expense of your own peace. You are not meant to reopen wounds just because they are now aware of them. Awareness does not equal readiness. And you already lived the cost of loving someone who wasn't ready. What you are learning now is discernment. The ability to feel deeply without abandoning yourself. The ability to acknowledge connection without letting it dictate your future. This is the kind of emotional maturity that changes your life. You will start noticing that your standards are shifting. Not in a defensive way, but in a grounded one. You're no longer impressed by intensity alone. You're no longer drawn to potential without presence. You want steadiness. You want emotional availability that doesn't disappear when things get real. You want someone who doesn't have to lose you to understand your value. That desire is forming quietly, but firmly. And as it does, the energetic pull you once felt toward them loosens. Not because the connection was meaningless, but because its role in your life is complete. Some connections come to stay. Others come to wake you up. This one woke you up. It showed you how deeply you can connect. How intuitively you love. How naturally you create emotional safety. Those qualities were never meant to be wasted on someone who couldn't choose you fully. They were meant to be returned to you, and eventually shared with someone who can meet them without fear. Right now, you may still feel moments of sadness. That's natural. Healing doesn't erase emotion, it integrates it. But the sadness no longer feels like rejection. It feels like release. And release is powerful. You are no longer tied to their outcome. Whether they grow, regret, or remain stuck, that is no longer your emotional responsibility. Your intuition didn't awaken to keep you connected to their pain. It awakened to bring you back to yourself. And the more you listen to it now, the clearer your path becomes. You're not moving backward. You're not missing something you were meant to have. You're moving forward with wisdom you couldn't have gained any other way. They are learning through loss. You are learning through clarity. And that difference will shape the rest of your life. There is more ahead for you than unresolved connection. There is more ahead than being the lesson in someone else's story. There is a love ahead that doesn't need intuition to decode, because it will be obvious, consistent, and present. For now, breathe into the space you've created. Trust the quiet. Trust the steadiness. Trust the version of you that no longer needs answers to feel whole. You were right to trust your intuition. And now, you're right to trust where it's leading you next. Come a little closer now. This is the part where things don't feel loud or dramatic anymore. This is where the truth settles into the body instead of the mind. Where you stop trying to understand everything and begin to feel grounded in what you already know. There's a reason the intensity around this connection has been fading for you, even while something inside them feels heavier. It's not because the bond wasn't real. It's because bonds like this are meant to teach different lessons to different people. For you, the lesson was about self-trust. For them, the lesson is about consequence. They are starting to notice patterns in themselves that they once avoided looking at. Not because they suddenly became more self-aware, but because life is now forcing the mirror in front of them. They see how often they choose comfort over honesty. How often they delay difficult conversations. How often they tell themselves they'll deal with emotions later, only to realize later always arrives uninvited. This awareness is uncomfortable. It makes ordinary moments feel heavier. It creates a quiet dissatisfaction that no external stability can fix. And even though they may not consciously link this discomfort to you, the emotional memory of you is woven into it. You represented a different way of living. A way that required presence instead of avoidance. Truth instead of convenience. And now, as they sit in the results of their choice, that contrast is becoming impossible to ignore. But here's the subtle shift that's happening inside you. You're no longer emotionally curious about their pain in the same way. You don't feel pulled to understand it or resolve it. You can sense it without being drawn into it. That's not detachment from love. That's emotional sovereignty. You are reclaiming your energy. There was a time when your nervous system was attuned to theirs. When you could feel their moods, their confusion, their hesitation. You interpreted those sensations as responsibility. As care. As connection. Now, you're learning the difference between empathy and entanglement. Empathy allows you to understand without losing yourself. Entanglement asks you to carry what isn't yours. You are stepping out of entanglement. This is why things feel quieter. Why the ache feels less personal. Why you're not scanning for signs or meanings anymore. Your system is recalibrating to your own life, your own rhythm. And as that happens, something important becomes clear. You were never meant to stay in a connection where your depth had nowhere to land. Depth without reciprocity becomes exhaustion. Emotional insight without emotional availability becomes loneliness. You felt that, even when the connection still felt alive. Now you understand it. They, on the other hand, are feeling the delayed impact of that imbalance. They are realizing what it means to be with someone who doesn't fully meet them emotionally. They are noticing the absence of curiosity, the lack of attunement, the surface-level comfort that once felt appealing but now feels limiting. This doesn't mean they are unhappy in obvious ways. It means they are unfulfilled in quiet ones. And quiet unfulfillment is often more painful, because there's nothing specific to point to. No clear problem to solve. Just a persistent sense that something is missing. That missing piece is not you as a person. It's the depth you embodied. And depth has a way of haunting people who walk away from it before they're ready. But listen carefully, because this is where many people get stuck. It is tempting to believe that someone's pain validates your worth. That their regret confirms your value. That their discomfort proves you mattered. But your worth was never dependent on their realization. You mattered even when they didn't choose you. You mattered even when they walked away. You mattered even when they tried to replace depth with ease. Their pain doesn't add meaning to your experience. It simply reflects their own growth curve. Your meaning comes from how you responded. You didn't harden. You didn't close off. You didn't numb yourself to avoid feeling again. You allowed the grief to teach you. You allowed the silence to speak. You allowed the loss to refine you rather than reduce you. That is not something everyone can do. This is why you're standing on different emotional ground now. You're not bitter. You're not resentful. You're not waiting for closure. You're integrating the experience into who you are becoming. And that integration changes the way you move through the world. You're more discerning now. Not suspicious, but aware. You notice when someone is emotionally present and when they are just emotionally interesting. You can feel the difference between potential and availability. Between chemistry and consistency. This awareness will protect you without closing your heart. They, meanwhile, are learning from the opposite direction. Through absence. Through comparison. Through the slow realization that avoiding depth doesn't remove the need for it. And even if they never consciously articulate this lesson, it will shape them. But it does not shape you anymore. You are no longer living in reaction to their decision. You are living in response to your own values. You value honesty, emotional courage, presence, mutual effort. You value being chosen clearly, not held ambiguously. And because you value these things, you will no longer settle for half connections, no matter how intense they feel. This is the quiet power you're stepping into. Not the power of being unforgettable, but the power of being unavailable to what cannot meet you. There may still be moments when they cross your mind. That doesn't mean you're regressing. Memory doesn't equal attachment. It just means something meaningful once passed through your life. And meaningful things leave traces. But those traces no longer pull you backward. They simply remind you of what you are capable of feeling, and what you deserve to feel again, fully, reciprocated. One day, you'll notice something else. You'll feel drawn towards someone new, not with urgency, not with intensity, but with calm interest. With ease. With a sense of recognition that doesn't destabilize you. And in that connection, you won't need to wonder where you stand. You won't need intuition to decode silence. You won't need to interpret mixed signals. Their presence will be consistent. Their interest will be clear. Their choice will be steady. And when you experience that, you'll understand something deeply. The connection you're releasing now was not meant to be your destination. It was meant to be your initiation. It opened you. It challenged you. It showed you both the beauty and the cost of emotional depth. And then it asked you to choose yourself. You are doing that now. Their journey continues in its own way. With its own lessons. With its own discomforts. You don't need to watch it unfold. Your intuition is no longer tuned to their pain. It's tuned to your alignment. And alignment feels like peace. Like groundedness. Like moving forward without looking over your shoulder. You didn't lose something that was meant to stay. You completed something that was meant to change you. And from this place, with this clarity, the next chapter of your life begins, not with confusion, not with longing, but with quiet confidence in who you are and what you are ready to receive. You are no longer waiting. You are becoming. Sit with me in this space for a while. There's no rush here. Nothing you need to prove, nothing you need to figure out right now. Just let the words meet you where you are, because this is the part where the story softens and deepens at the same time. Something inside you has changed more than you realize. You might still think about them occasionally, but it no longer feels like reaching into an open wound. It feels more like touching a scar. Evidence of something real that healed in its own time. The sharpness is gone. What remains is awareness. And awareness is powerful. You are beginning to live from a place where your emotional center belongs to you again. You wake up and your first thought isn't about what they might be feeling or whether they regret their decision. You move through your day more present. More grounded. Less pulled in invisible directions. That doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped abandoning yourself. At the same time, their inner world is still unsettled. They are learning something slowly, and learning slowly can be the hardest way. There are days when they feel fine, almost convinced they made the right choice. And then there are moments, unexpected, quiet moments, when a wave of heaviness comes over them without warning. Not sadness exactly. More like emptiness. They may be surrounded by people. They may be doing everything right. But there is a lack of depth they can't name, and because they can't name it, they can't fix it. You once named things for them without trying. You reflected their inner world back to them in a way that felt safe. You asked questions that weren't invasive, just honest. You noticed shifts in their energy before they did. And now, without that mirror, they feel slightly lost in themselves. This is not your burden to carry. What's important is that you no longer feel responsible for holding emotional space for someone who could not hold it with you. That sense of responsibility was never love, it was overgiving. And you're learning to release it. You're also learning something else, something even more important. You're learning that intuition doesn't always mean attachment. Sometimes intuition is simply recognition without action. You recognized the connection. You recognized the depth. You recognized the truth of what you shared. And now, you recognize that it has served its purpose. This doesn't make the connection smaller. It makes it complete. Completion doesn't always come with closure conversations or dramatic endings. Sometimes it comes quietly, when your nervous system finally relaxes and says, "I'm safe now." That's what's happening to you. You are beginning to trust that what is meant for you will not require you to chase, convince, or wait in uncertainty. You are beginning to trust that love does not have to feel like emotional labor to be real. And this trust is changing the way you see everything. You notice how different it feels to be emotionally available without being emotionally drained. You notice how much lighter your body feels when you're not anticipating someone else's moods. You notice how much space you have for your own thoughts, your own desires, your own future. This space is not empty. It's fertile. It's where something new will eventually grow. Meanwhile, they are confronting the opposite experience. The space they thought would feel freeing now feels hollow. The quiet they once wanted now feels uncomfortable. They are realizing that distraction is not fulfillment, and stability without depth can feel strangely lonely. This realization doesn't come all at once. It arrives in fragments. In moments where they feel misunderstood but don't know why. In conversations that feel functional but not nourishing. In nights where they lie awake, not missing you specifically, but missing the feeling of being truly known. That feeling doesn't leave easily. But again, this is not an invitation for you to return. It is simply confirmation that depth leaves an imprint. And you are no longer living for confirmation. You are living for alignment. Alignment feels calm. It feels like self-respect. It feels like choosing not to engage with emotional ambiguity anymore. You don't want half answers. You don't want almost commitment. You don't want to be someone's internal conflict. You want to be someone's clarity. And because you want that, you're becoming more selective, not colder, just wiser. You are learning to listen not only to what people say, but to how they show up consistently. You are learning to trust actions over emotional intensity. You are learning that love should expand your life, not keep you suspended in uncertainty. This learning is quiet, but it's reshaping you. You may not even realize how different you are until one day, someone treats you with clear interest, steady presence, and emotional availability, and instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel at ease. That's when you'll know how much you've grown. You'll know because your body won't tense. Your mind won't spiral. Your intuition won't feel alert or anxious. It will feel settled. And settled love is very different from intense love. Settled love doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't make you wait. It doesn't make you interpret silence. It meets you where you are and stays. The connection you're releasing now taught you how deeply you can feel. The one that comes next will teach you how safe love can be. And safety does not mean boring. It means regulated. It means mutual. It means real. As for them, their journey continues in its own way. They may grow from this. They may not. They may one day understand what they lost, or they may simply carry the quiet awareness that something meaningful passed through their life and changed them. Either way, it no longer defines you. You are not the lesson they failed to learn. You are the person who learned from loving fully. And that matters more. You are stepping into a phase of your life where you no longer romanticize emotional struggle. Where you no longer confuse longing with destiny. Where you no longer believe that love has to hurt to be profound. You are redefining what connection means to you. It means being seen without having to explain yourself. It means being chosen without hesitation. It means being met, not managed. This redefinition didn't come from theory. It came from experience. From heartbreak. From intuition. From growth. And because it came this way, it will stay with you. You don't need to close your heart to protect yourself now. Your discernment does that naturally. You don't need walls. You have boundaries. You don't need to be guarded. You are grounded. That is a very different energy. And it will attract a very different kind of love. For now, let yourself rest in this knowing. You trusted your intuition when it told you something was real. You trusted it again when it told you to let go. And now, you are trusting it as it guides you forward. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was taken from you. You became more yourself through this. And that is always the point. Stay here with me a little longer. This is not the part where something dramatic happens. This is the part where something real settles into place. Where the noise fades enough for you to hear yourself again. There is a quiet confidence beginning to form in you now. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be seen. It simply exists. You might notice it in small ways. How you don't rush to explain yourself anymore, how you pause before responding, how you no longer feel the urge to chase clarity from people who live in confusion. That shift didn't come from strength alone. It came from exhaustion. You reached a point where holding on hurt more than letting go. Where trying to understand someone else's inner world cost you access to your own. And something inside you finally chose peace, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself in a deeper way. This is what growth actually looks like. Not dramatic declarations. Not sudden closure. Just a steady return to yourself. Meanwhile, their experience continues to unfold very differently. They are living with the emotional aftershock of a decision they once felt certain about. Not in a way that disrupts their daily life outwardly, but in a way that quietly changes how they experience it. They go through motions that used to feel sufficient, and now feel slightly empty. They engage in conversations that sound right, but don't quite land. They feel a restlessness that has no obvious source. And because they can't trace it to a single moment or mistake, they struggle to name it. This is often how regret begins, not with longing, but with disorientation. They are starting to realize that the comfort they chose came at a cost they didn't calculate at the time. Emotional ease can feel like peace in the beginning, but when it lacks depth, it eventually reveals itself as avoidance. And avoidance always collects interest. They are paying that interest now. Not because you are gone, but because the part of themselves that was most alive with you has gone quiet. That part doesn't disappear easily. It waits. It lingers. It watches. And sometimes, it hurts. You sense this not because you're meant to do something about it, but because you once shared a frequency. That resonance doesn't vanish overnight. It fades gradually, as your attention returns to where it belongs. And it is returning. You are beginning to feel less pulled toward the past and more anchored in the present. You don't need to force this. It's happening naturally, as your nervous system learns that it no longer has to stay alert. For a long time, you were emotionally vigilant. Watching for shifts. Reading between lines. Interpreting silence. Anticipating change. That kind of emotional labor is heavy, even when it comes from love. Now, you are learning what it feels like to rest emotionally. Rest doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't brace yourself anymore. You let moments pass without assigning them meaning. You let people show you who they are without trying to translate it. You let uncertainty exist without rushing to resolve it. This is not detachment. This is trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in timing. Trust that what is meant to meet you will not require constant emotional vigilance. This trust is something they do not yet have. They are still trying to make sense of the discomfort they feel. Still asking themselves why things don't feel as satisfying as they expected. Still wondering why stability feels heavier than it should. They may tell themselves it's stress. Or routine. Or life. But beneath those explanations is a deeper truth they're not ready to face fully yet. They walked away from a connection that required them to be emotionally present. And emotional presence is a muscle. If it's not used, it weakens. They are noticing that now. Conversations feel less alive. Emotional exchanges feel less nuanced. They may feel understood on the surface, but not known in the way they once were. And that difference matters more than they expected. Because being known changes you. Once you've experienced it, you can't unlearn it. You can distract yourself from it, but you can't replace it easily. This is where their pain lies, not in missing you as a person, but in missing the version of themselves that existed in your presence. That version felt more honest. More expressive. More awake. They didn't realize how much they valued that until it was gone. But again, this is not your responsibility to witness or hold. Your responsibility now is simpler, and harder. It is to continue choosing yourself even when the past still whispers. There will be moments when a memory surfaces unexpectedly. A song. A place. A thought that catches you off guard. That doesn't mean you're moving backward. It means you're human. Healing doesn't erase memory. It changes your relationship to it. Instead of pulling you into longing, memories now pass through you with softness. With gratitude. With a quiet understanding that something meaningful once existed, and that it served its purpose. Purpose doesn't always mean permanence. Some connections are meant to open you, not stay with you. You are beginning to understand that. And with that understanding comes a deeper discernment about love. You are no longer drawn to emotional mystery. You are no longer intrigued by mixed signals or emotional distance. What once felt exciting now feels tiring. What once felt meaningful now feels incomplete. You want presence. Not constant intensity. Not grand gestures. Just consistency. Clarity. Emotional availability that doesn't disappear when things get real. This desire is not coming from fear. It's coming from self-respect. You've learned what it costs to pour yourself into someone who isn't fully available. You've felt the confusion, the waiting, the emotional imbalance. And you've learned that love should not require you to shrink or stay on hold. This learning has settled into your body now, not just your mind. That's why you feel calmer. That's why your reactions are slower. That's why you don't feel the need to prove or explain yourself as much. You trust your internal experience. They, on the other hand, are still learning to sit with theirs. They are discovering that avoiding depth doesn't remove the need for it. It only delays the moment when its absence becomes painful. They are realizing that emotional safety without emotional honesty feels empty over time. These realizations are not comfortable. They disrupt the narrative they built to justify their choice. And disruption is unsettling. But it is also necessary. Whether they grow from this or remain stuck is not something you need to track. Their journey is unfolding according to their capacity, not your connection. You are free from monitoring it now. That freedom may feel unfamiliar at first. You were so used to being emotionally engaged, attuned, aware. Now, without that constant pull, there is space. And space can feel strange before it feels good. But in that space, you are reconnecting with parts of yourself that were quiet before. Your own interests. Your own rhythms. Your own desires that don't revolve around someone else's emotional state. You are remembering who you are when you are not waiting. This remembering is powerful. It restores your sense of agency. It reminds you that your life is not defined by who chose you or who didn't. It is defined by how you choose to live, love, and show up. You are choosing differently now. You are choosing alignment over attachment. Peace over possibility. Truth over fantasy. These choices will shape your future in ways you cannot fully see yet, but you will feel them. You will feel them when someone new enters your life and you don't feel anxious. When connection doesn't come with confusion. When affection doesn't require interpretation. You will feel them when you realize you no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. The connection you are releasing taught you how deeply you can feel. The next one will teach you how supported that depth can be. And when that happens, something inside you will click into place. You will understand that what you thought you lost was actually a bridge. A passage. A necessary experience that brought you here. Here, where you are more grounded. More aware. More selective without being closed. Here, where you trust yourself. You trusted your intuition when it told you the connection was real. You trusted it again when it told you something was off. And now, you are trusting it as it leads you forward. That intuition was never meant to bind you to someone else's journey. It was meant to guide you back to your own. And it has done that. What remains now is not longing, but readiness. Readiness for a love that doesn't hesitate. Readiness for a connection that doesn't require emotional translation. Readiness for being met fully, without having to ask. You don't need to rush toward that future. You don't need to search for it. It will recognize you the same way you recognize yourself now. Quietly, clearly, without doubt. For now, rest in this phase. Let the calm settle. Let the space expand. Let yourself be here without looking back. You are not missing out. You are not behind. You are not unfinished. You are becoming someone who knows what they deserve and is no longer willing to accept less. And that is not the end of the story. It is the moment the story finally belongs to you.